Thank you, John. Hello, everyone. I'm David Ringstrom, CPA in Atlanta. Welcome to Excel for Sales Professionals. Over the course of our time together today, my goal is to share with you some ways that you can use Excel more effectively. That's my goal, is to share with you some techniques that you can use so that when you do need to analyze data in Excel, you can do so more gracefully and also more efficiently. And one of the first features that I want to make sure that you're aware of is the filter feature. The filter feature allows us to take portions of an Excel worksheet and collapse it down to just the data that we want to see. To filter data, typically you only have to select a single cell within the list. So we would go to the Data tab of the ribbon. In step 3, we can click on the Filter command. One thing those filter buttons are great for is doing reconnaissance on the data. Our next feature, which is the pivot table feature. What a pivot table allows us to do is to transform a list, such as the list that we would filter, and transform it into a report. We don't have to write any formulas. We're just simply making choices with our mouse. We can select any cell within our list. Step 2, we go to the Insert menu. 3, we'll click the Pivot Table command. So that's the first command on the Insert tab of the ribbon. Brings up a Create Pivot Table dialog box. So step 4, we'll click OK. At that point, what we're going to see on the screen is we're going to see a blank pivot table canvas and then a couple other screen elements. So we see that the Analyze and Design tabs appear when your cursor is inside the pivot table itself. This initially is a blank canvas where the report will materialize. So let's build a report here. The purpose of the Values quadrant is to actually summarize data. The purpose of the Rows quadrant is to specify which fields do we want to see a row for. So if I want to see a row for each product, then if I take product and drop it in the Rows quadrant, notice then step 2 shows that my report, this is the beginning of my report. I will see an alphabetical listing of one of each product. In that case, what I would do is click the vendor checkbox or take vendor and drag it down to the Rows quadrant. That would then expand the pivot table so I could then see that detail. And so ultimately what I'm going to do is I'm going to take product and drag it up to the columns quadrant. We can then filter our report. If we click the filter button for either column labels or row labels, that will let us take data off the report so that I could compare just apples and oranges, for instance. And so the slicer command is going to show up on the Analyze menu. We choose the Insert Slicer. It's going to give us a listing of all of the fields that are available for that pivot table. So we're going to choose one or more fields. We're going to click OK. We'll be able to filter the pivot table by making choices from our slicer here. In general, there does tend to be 3 or 4 ways to do everything in Excel. Not that you need to know the 3 or 4 ways to do everything, but just be aware that there do look more for the patterns. And so one thing I want to make sure that you're aware of is when you're working with a pivot table, you cannot physically delete columns or rows that intersect with the pivot table. So how do we take fields off that we don't want? We've seen a couple of these already. We can clear the checkbox. So if you just clear the checkbox, that takes it off the list. Another way that we saw, grab the field name and drag it off the field list and then release your mouse. That too will remove the field from the field list. Now within the quadrants, each field has a button has a menu to it. And if you click the arrow on the right-hand side of the field, that will then let you remove the field. Or you can also right-click any field in the pivot table and then choose Remove there as well. Another benefit of pivot tables is that they offer a drill down capability. And if you double-click on any number inside a pivot table, that will then create a brand new worksheet that will display the underlying records from that source data there. In fact, we can take it a step further on our drill down sheet. We'll see a table design tab appears in the ribbon. We can click and add the total row, and we can add a total to any column there. And Excel offers the remove duplicates command that allows us to do that. If you have multiple columns, it's going to treat each cell, each row as its own unique record there. If we select any cell within our list, go to the data menu, click remove duplicates, click OK again. It will then tell us how many unique values were found and removed, or how many duplicates were found and removed, and then how many unique values remain. So we're going to look at a couple of different worksheet functions. We're going to look at using the VLOOKUP function. VLOOKUP is helpful for matching, doing approximate matches in particular. So VLOOKUP needs to know 4 different things. It needs to know the lookup value, So that's what are we looking for. It also wants to know the table array, and that's going to be the cell coordinates of our list. It wants to know what column within that list do we want to return data from. And then finally, we're going to put the word true to tell it that we want an approximate match, a SUMIF function. And what SUMIF can allow us to do is to summarize data similar to using a pivot table, maybe when you want more control over the data that you're summarizing. So SUMIF has 3 arguments. There's a range argument, which is where you're going to tell it where to look. My criteria is going to be the winery. My sum range, what do I want to add up? I'm going to say I want to look up the values for column C. This is going to allow me to put one formula in this cell, copy it down and copy it across, and create an instant report. So the next thing we're going to look at is the Bing Maps feature. Allows us, if we have a series of addresses, either street addresses or just city-state, that will allow us to create a map that is an interactive map inside Excel. So if we select our data, step 2, we'd go to the Insert menu. Step 3, we click Bing Maps. Step 4, we want to click the Show Locations button at the top of the map. That will then make all the locations appear on our map there. Last feature I want to leave you with is the Forecast feature in Excel. This one does require Excel 2016 and later. If you have a set of date-based data, so maybe projected sales, if you select that data, go to the Data menu, choose Forecast Sheet. You can choose between a line chart and a bar chart, and then specify when you want the forecast to end. When you click Create, Excel will create a new worksheet that projects out the sales and gives you a best case, worst case, and most likely scenario. Well, that's my time for the day. I do want to thank you for attending. I hope that you found the presentation helpful. With that, I'll thank you for attending, and here is John to wrap things up. Thank you for attending, and hope to see you back soon for another presentation. Until then, have a good day.
Thanks, David. Thank you, participants. So with this, we conclude this session for today. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining today's webinar. Have a great day.